That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
All right, guys, I'm extremely excited. We are just days away from the NFL season starting. We've been looking forward to this for months now. If y'all been following the channel, y'all know pretty much we've been getting all a Dynasty fantasy football or just a regular fantasy football video every single day of the entire offseason. Now we finally have some action. The speculation is about to be over. I mean, we're still going to be speculating week to week, but we are going to have so many more data points to go off of. It's just going to be a completely different ballgame. But before I get into the video, I'm going to talk about 5 guys that you have to go out there and you have to target before week 1 because their prices in both redraft and dynasty leagues are going to be drastically different and are going to skyrocket this season, and you're not going to be able to obtain them for the price that they are going at right now. I just ask that you go down there to the description of the video, join our group chat. I mean, we're going to be talking fantasy football and dynasty fantasy football all throughout the season and completely free. A bunch of great guys down there. I think we have 800 people in the group chat as of now, but I would love to continue to increase that number and continue to see some great conversation happening. But now let's move to our first player in this group of 5, and this is going to be Juju Smith-Schuster. So you know, if you've been following the channel all offseason, Juju has been my #1 buy. I've been prioritizing him across all of my dynasty leagues, and I have him in approximately half of my fantasy football leagues. And I know that's crazy. I have a lot of money in fantasy football. I have a lot of leagues. So to have so much exposure to one player is extremely risky. It's extremely volatile. But this should tell you exactly how confident that I am in buying Juju Smith-Schuster at his current price, both in redraft leagues and in dynasty leagues. I truly think that we are going to look at this 2020 season and we are going to see Juju become a top 6 wide receiver overall, while you can go out there and you can draft him as a high-end wide receiver 2 in redraft leagues and draft him as a low-end wide receiver 1 in dynasty leagues. This is a player that I believe is 22 years old, maybe about to turn 23, and he has already proven to be a wide receiver 1 at the NFL level. We saw his 2019 season plummet because not only did we see an injury to Ben Roethlisberger, but we also saw one to Juju Smith-Schuster himself. So I think that we are going to look back and look at the 2019 season that Juju had and compare it to the Brock Osweiler season with DeAndre Hopkins way back when. And Juju is going to be a guy dominating the NFL and dominating fantasy football leagues, both in 2020 and for years to come. Please go out there, go make aggressive offers for Juju. Try to get him in leagues before it is too late. Now, we are going to move on to a rookie that I also have in way too many leagues, and this is Henry Ruggs. Now, the reason I have Henry Ruggs stashed everywhere is the fact that he was the first wide receiver drafted in the NFL draft ahead of CeeDee Lamb, ahead of Jerry Jeudy. And this does not necessarily mean that he should be the #1 wide receiver in terms of fantasy football, because we know that real NFL value does not necessarily correlate 1-for-1 in terms of fantasy points. I talk about this all the time in terms of we are building fantasy football rosters. We are not acting as real life NFL GMs, but we are looking at a player in Henry Ruggs that is going to provide so much value to this Las Vegas Raiders offense that he is going to be an early year contributor starting in week 1. I truly believe because the speed that he has, and we see Tyrell Williams go on the injured reserve, which I see flying under the radar everywhere. People are talking about it being great news for Bryan Edwards, whereas Henry Ruggs is the guy who really profiles to be more like Tyrell Williams. So I think this kind of cements Henry Ruggs to be a wide receiver starting in week 1. He is going to be playing more snaps than any other wide receiver on this Las Vegas Raiders offense, just because he's going to be able to provide the team something they desperately need in terms of speed and stretching the defense. He's also a guy that's not going to need a ton of targets from Derek Carr to be extremely productive, just due to the fact that if we look at his college career, I'm pretty sure that he had a crazy stat, like one in every 6 times that he touched the ball, he scored a touchdown. This is a guy that is the definition of explosive, and he's a guy that's going to get opportunity from day 1, and we know that his role is going to only increase over the span of the entire NFL season. So Henry Ruggs, I mean, there is no reason that he cannot finish at least as a wide receiver 3 in fantasy football in 2020, and he has the week-to-week upside to easily be a wide receiver 1. Now, you can go out there and in redraft leagues, you can go and draft him as your wide receiver 5. And in dynasty leagues, you could go out there and trade a future first-round pick for Henry Ruggs. I mean, this is a player that is kind of a can't miss in my opinion, just because the fact that he's going to get on the field, he's going to get opportunity, so it's going to be extremely hard to see his value either not increase or even just stay the same. But now let's move to a player that I was begging y'all to go out there and buy all offseason. Yes, his price has drastically increased over the past month, but this is Antonio Gibson. So with Antonio Gibson, we didn't necessarily foresee him seeing the drastic spike with the Darius Geis cut, but the entire thesis around Antonio Gibson was the fact that this was a team that brought him in at the very beginning of the 3rd round of the NFL draft. So I was all along saying that it did not necessarily matter who was in the backfield currently, due to the fact that Antonio Gibson was going to see the ball no matter what. The team made the investment. They decided that he was a guy worth going out there and spending that premium draft capital on. And when we see that from a player who has the size of a 3-down back, has the athleticism of pretty much being a top athlete across any NFL position, I mean, he's a better athlete than guys you would never expect him to be. I mean, look it up, please. Go look at his 40 time. It is incredible for the size that he is at. He is a former wide receiver, so he does have probably some of the best pass catching ability coming from the running back position out of any guy in the NFL. The only knock against him is he did not have the collegiate touches to really back the profile. But this can be explained away due to the fact that Antonio Gibson was a JUCO transfer. So, I mean, he's not necessarily a guy that prototypes to be able to go in there and automatically transfer schools, automatically change positions, and command a significant portion of his team's volume. So going into 2020, yes, we don't necessarily expect Antonio Gibson to command more than 15 carries a game, but at the same time, the touches that he is going to see in Washington are going to be the high leverage touches where he is the bigger back in the backfield, so he is going to get the goal line work, and he's going to be the best pass catching running back in that backfield, so he's going to see the receiving work. So starting in week 1, he's automatically going to have a role on that team who desperately lacks playmakers. And then once he can fully transition to becoming a pro running back, then we're going to see his ultimate upside fully be unlocked down the stretch when we're going into the fantasy football playoffs. So, I mean, he's a guy that has the immediate floor. He has the long-term ceiling. There's nothing more that you could ask for except going out there and getting him when he was cheapest over 2 months ago, which if you've been a fan of the channel, I know while I was talking in the Patreon group chat, most of y'all already have Antonio Gibson. So this is mainly for the people who are new listeners, or maybe they don't even have their fantasy football drafts yet. Maybe they can go out there. They're just playing in fantasy football leagues with their high school buddies. I mean, that's a league that you can definitely go out there and get Antonio Gibson for way less than he is truly worth. Now, our last 2 players, we're going to start it off with Will Fuller, who's also a guy who's seen his price drastically increase over the past month, especially in high-stakes fantasy football formats. This is one thing I like to do. I like to see the players that are going significantly higher in high-stakes expert leagues versus low-stakes casual fantasy football leagues. And what I mean by high-stake expert leagues, I'm not talking about these BS, just fake TV leagues that you would see on ESPN with their quote-unquote fantasy football analyst going through and making a draft when none of them really know more than the average Joe. I'm talking about the guys who are going out there, spending $5,000 on a fantasy football league, playing at high stakes, shooting for $1 million grand prize. They are the ones that are pushing up the Will Fuller ADP, whereas if you look at sites like Yahoo Fantasy, if you look at sites like NFL Fantasy or ESPN, Will Fuller is drastically way too far down the draft board. I mean, he should be going in the 5th round. He starts his year off against the Kansas City Chiefs in week 1. He's really the only wide receiver left on that team that should command a significant amount of targets. And while he's had Deshaun Watson throwing him the ball, he's been highly efficient, highly productive. Nothing really more you could ask for from Will Fuller than he's given you, except the fact that he has been injury prone. But we know that we have not seen him deal with any injuries throughout camp. So I think at this point, even if he does miss 3 or 4 weeks, I would much rather have 12 weeks of Will Fuller than 12 weeks of a average wide receiver in fantasy, because when Will Fuller is healthy, I think we can safely project him to be a low-end wide receiver 1, a high-end wide receiver 2. Now, let's finish off the video with a tight end who is an athletic freak going into year 3. I mean, that's going to be the guy that we are going to go out and target at the position. I mean, we're going to try to get the guys that are highly athletic, because we know that that is what translates over to fantasy points. We look at a guy like George Kittle, who is a day 3 draft pick, now the premier tight end in the NFL. He has the receiving capability. He has the elite level athleticism. The same thing that Mike Oseki has down in Miami playing for the Dolphins. And what is also great about Mike Oseki, other than his elite level athleticism, is he is only going into year 3 in this Miami Dolphins offense. So he does have a ton of potential to increase his role and to increase the amount of targets that he's seen, especially if we compare to last season. And on top of all of this, we only see 2 significant pass catchers in Miami. We know that Allen Hurns and Albert Wilson both opt out on the COVID list, so there is no clear wide receiver 3. We do see them trade for a former Las Vegas Raiders running back in Lynn Bowden Jr., but Lynn Bowden is a rookie as is. He's going to be switching positions again back from running back to wide receiver, so he's clearly not going to be any threat for targets in year 1. So Mike Oseki, you can confidently slide him behind Devontae Parker and Preston Williams as being the clear tight end 3, and there's not going to be many tight ends going to any players besides those 3 in the offense. So when I am looking at Mike Oseki, I'm looking at a player that was able to accumulate a good amount of volume in year 2. Now he is going into year 3. He has no real target competition on this team, and he has an elite level of athleticism. I mean, this is everything that we want to see from a player. This is everything we want to see from a tight end who is going near the end of fantasy football drafts. Pretty sure in some of the mocks that we have just done through our Discord chat, I've actually gotten Mike Oseki as either my last or second to last round pick. I mean, if he is going anywhere near that type of value in your own fantasy football league, he's a guy that you should be pressing the button on every single time. But yeah, that's all I got for y'all. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. And the big takeaway is go get Juju. I mean, we are going to regret it if we are looking back 4 weeks from now and he is not on your roster and he is beating you down while you have to face him. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.